The detention cell hummed with the low frequency of alien technology, a sound that had become as familiar to Marcus Webb as his own breathing over the past 3 years. He sat on the metal bench, his scarred hands resting on his knees, watching the door with eyes that had seen too much. The fluorescent blue lighting cast strange shadows across the walls, making the cramped space feel even smaller than it was. When the door finally opened, Marcus didn't bother standing. He'd learned long ago that showing deference to his captors only encouraged them. But something made him look up, some instinct that had kept him alive through impossible odds. The figure in the doorway wore the black and silver uniform of a Calthrine battle commander, her forearms folded in the traditional pose of authority. Her scaled skin gleamed violet under the harsh lights, and her crest rose high above her angular head. She was tall, even for her species, standing at least 8 feet. But it wasn't her imposing presence that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was the way she froze when their eyes met. Her mandibles trembled. Her secondary arms dropped to her sides, breaking protocol. And then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, the translator chip converting her words into something he could understand. You survived. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew that voice. Even filtered through alien technology, even after all these years, he knew it. Commander Valrus, he said quietly. She took a step back, her hand moving instinctively to the weapon at her side before stopping. The guards behind her chittered in confusion, their antennae twitching as they sensed their commander's distress. She barked something at them in her native tongue, and they retreated, sealing the door behind them. They were alone. Valrus moved closer, her movements careful, as if approaching something dangerous. Her eyes, large and multifaceted, studied every inch of him. She was searching for something, he realized. Confirmation, perhaps, that he was really who she thought he was. The research station, she finally said. Outpost 7. We destroyed it completely. The antimatter charges left nothing but particles. There were no survivors. There could not have been survivors. Marcus leaned back against the cold wall, a bitter smile touching his lips. I was in the lower levels when you attacked, running diagnostics on a water recycling system. Boring work, the kind nobody wants to do. Lucky for me. The lower levels were vaporized with everything else, Valrus insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. We scanned the debris field for weeks. You scanned for life signs, Marcus corrected. But I wasn't alive when you were scanning. Technically, anyway. Understanding dawned in her alien features. The emergency stasis pods. One of them survived the blast. Damaged, failing, but functional enough to keep me frozen until a salvage ship found me 8 months later. By then, your fleet had moved on to other targets. Valrus moved to the bench across from him, her massive form settling onto the metal surface with surprising grace. She was quiet for a long moment, her crest lowering slightly. When she spoke again, her voice carried something he'd never heard from a Calthrine before: regret. I gave the order myself, she said. The outpost was conducting research into genetic weapons. Intelligence indicated you were developing a plague to wipe out my people. We were developing a cure, Marcus said flatly. Your intelligence was wrong. We'd intercepted a bioweapon that one of your own rogue factions had created. We were trying to synthesize an antidote before it could be deployed. The silence that followed was deafening. Valrus's hands clenched and unclenched, her claws scraping against her palms. No, that cannot be. We had verified reports. We had evidence. You had what someone wanted you to have, Marcus said. Think about it, Commander. Who benefits when humans and Calthrine are at war? Who profits from our mutual destruction? He could see her mind working, connecting pieces she'd perhaps always known were there, but had refused to acknowledge. The Calthrine were warriors, proud and fierce, but they weren't stupid. Valrus had risen to command rank through intelligence, as much as combat prowess. The Merchants Guild, she breathed. They sold us the intelligence. They brokered the weapons deals. They've been supplying both sides. And getting rich while our people die, Marcus finished. The researchers at Outpost 7 had figured it out. We were going to go public to show both our governments the truth. That's why you were sent to destroy us. Not because we were a threat to the Calthrine, but because we were a threat to their profit margin. Valrus stood abruptly, pacing the small cell like a caged predator. If this is true, if what you say is accurate, then I have committed a war crime. I murdered civilians, scientists, peacemakers. You followed orders based on false intelligence, Marcus said. The real criminals are the ones who manufactured that intelligence. She turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw something in her alien features that looked almost human. Pain, guilt, the weight of choices that couldn't be unmade. Why didn't you speak of this before? She demanded. You've been in our custody for 6 cycles. You've been interrogated, processed, held. Why remain silent? Who would believe a human prisoner telling stories about merchant conspiracies? Marcus asked. I needed someone who would listen. Someone who was there. Someone who might actually care about the truth. And you thought I would be that person? I hoped. Valrus resumed her pacing. Do you have proof? Evidence of this conspiracy? Marcus reached slowly into his shirt, moving carefully to avoid startling her. He withdrew a small data chip, holding it up to the light. Everything the outpost discovered. I grabbed it from a secure terminal on my way to the lower levels. Old habit from my days in intelligence. Always back up the important stuff. Why didn't they find this when you were captured? Because I swallowed it, Marcus said with a grim smile. And when I knew I was about to be caught, I swallowed it again. It's been making the same journey through my digestive system for 6 cycles now. Uncomfortable, but effective. Despite everything, despite the weight of their conversation, Valrus made a sound that might have been laughter. You humans. So fragile, yet so stubborn. We prefer determined, Marcus said, holding out the chip. The question is, what do you do now? You could destroy this, execute me, and pretend we never had this conversation. Or you could take a chance on peace. Valrus stared at the tiny piece of technology for a long moment. She reached out with one hand, her claws delicate as they plucked the chip from his palm. If I bring this forward, it will mean courts-martial. Investigations? Many powerful beings will want this buried. Yes, I could lose my command. My honor, perhaps my life. Also, yes. But it might end the war. It might. Valrus closed her hand around the chip. I will need you to testify. To explain the research, to verify the authenticity of this data. You will need to stand before both our peoples and tell this story. I've been waiting 3 years for the chance, Marcus said. She looked at him with those strange, multifaceted eyes, and something passed between them. An understanding. A shared burden. They were 2 soldiers on opposite sides of a manufactured conflict, both victims of forces that cared nothing for honor or truth. Commander Webb, she said, using his rank for the first time. That was your title, was it not? Before the outpost? It was. Then as one commander to another, I apologize. For the outpost. For your colleagues. For the years you have lost. Marcus stood, meeting her eyes despite the difference in their heights. Get this information to people who matter. Make sure their deaths meant something. That's all the apology I need. Valrus nodded slowly. Her crest rising in what he'd learned was a gesture of respect among her people. She turned toward the door, then paused. They will ask why I believed you. A human prisoner with a convenient story and convenient evidence. Tell them the truth, Marcus said, that you looked into the eyes of someone who survived the unsurvivable and recognized another soul carrying impossible weight. The door opened and Velrus stepped through, the data chip secured in her uniform. But before the door closed, she looked back one last time. You survived, she said again, and this time it wasn't a question or an accusation. It was a promise, a vow that his survival and the truth he carried would not be wasted. The door sealed shut, leaving Marcus alone in his cell once more. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than despair. He felt hope.